It has been nearly 7 weeks since the representatives of Russia and Ukraine last sat across a negotiating table. Now, on July the 23rd, 2025, the two sides convene once again, this time in Istanbul, Turkey, amid renewed hopes and hardened positions and mounting international pressure. Confirmed by Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky earlier this week, the talks are led by Rustem Umerov for Kiev, a senior security official with experience in past negotiations and prisoner swaps. Moscow has sent a high-level diplomatic delegation, but expectations remain modest. The setting is familiar, but will the outcome be any different this time? Ceasefire terms, territorial control and humanitarian concerns all on the table. Can diplomacy gain ground where bullets have not? I'm Helen Hamalawi. Welcome to In Depth. Russia and Ukraine are set to hold a new round of peace talks in Istanbul, focusing on draft memoranda aimed at resolving the conflict, with a particular emphasis on detainee exchanges and the return of Ukrainian children taken to Russia. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky confirmed the meeting and proposed discussions on a ceasefire and a direct meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. However, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov expressed low expectations for breakthroughs, stating that the two sides remain diametrically opposed and that significant diplomatic work lies ahead. The talks follow previous unsuccessful rounds dominated by prisoner swaps without a ceasefire. U.S. President Donald Trump has intensified pressure on Moscow with threats of severe sanctions to encourage progress.
Russia and Ukraine are preparing for a new round of negotiations in Istanbul this week. The talks, hosted by Turkey, come after previous rounds failed to secure a ceasefire and expectations remain low. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed the meeting and said it will focus on detainee exchanges and the return of Ukrainian children taken to Russia from Ukrainian territories, in addition to arranging a meeting between him and Russian President Vladimir Putin. However, the Kremlin has downplayed the possibility of major breakthroughs, with spokesman Dmitry Peskov stating the two sides remain diametrically opposed and a lot of diplomatic work lies ahead. While the fighting rages on, Russia has escalated its missile and drone attacks in recent weeks. On the diplomatic front, U.S. President Donald Trump has re-engaged, sending more weapons to Ukraine and warning Russia of severe sanctions if a ceasefire is not reached within 50 days. Meanwhile, Peskov said that Russia remains committed to achieving the goals that it set at the beginning of the war in 2022. The Istanbul meeting may yield progress on humanitarian issues, such as detainee exchange, like the previous round, but a full ceasefire remains elusive as both sides stand their ground.
And to understand what's at stake in these latest negotiations and whether any real movement is possible, we're joined now by two guests from both sides of the divide. From Moscow, we speak to Mr. Sergei Markov, former advisor to Russian President Vladimir Putin and, of course, a prominent political analyst. And from Kiev, we welcome Mr. Oleksiy Melnyk, former Deputy Defense Minister of Ukraine. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Mr. Markov, let me begin with you. Now, Russia has agreed to return to the negotiating table. Why now? And what are Moscow's immediate expectations from these talks?
First of all, you should understand that Russia suggested to have this peace talk already during whole months, and Ukrainian side denied during all these months. And now, finally, Ukrainian side agree, but Ukrainian and European propaganda pacify this fact and talking that it's Ukraine suggested this negotiation. It just shows what Donald Trump, Vladimir Zelensky, and European leaders want to make fake picture for the Donald Trump. They want to show that Vladimir Zelensky wants peace. That's why he suggested peace negotiation. But Vladimir Putin doesn't like peace and just has to have negotiation. But the situation absolutely opposite. Vladimir Putin suggested to Zelensky to have such negotiations during whole months. But all these months, Zelensky didn't give agreement, and now he finally did. So it's about the time. And about the position. Russian position is very clear. Russia wants to have a peace deal, and which is most important that Ukraine should change the regime from the current undemocratic Russophobic. All political prisoners should be liberated, and there are thousands of them. Also, all political repression and prohibition of Russian language should be stopped, and Russian language should get normal democratic status, official status. Also, political repression against Orthodox Church should be stopped immediately. Also, Ukraine should be neutral country by Ukrainian constitution and by international treaty, which include a NATO country also agreement with this. Also, Russia demands that those territories which already voted on referendum to join Russia should be part of the Russia. So this is the main Russian demands. About ceasefire. Russia agree for ceasefire, but Russia disagree with French and British decision, as they told that they promised that they will send 50,000 European troops to Ukrainian territory on the second day of ceasefire. Russia say no. Ceasefire should be only with condition that your European countries and no other country will send their troops to Ukrainian territory, and also they will stop to sending their weaponry to Ukrainian territory. So this Russian demands of ceasefire. Okay. But from our point of view, this negotiation only show of both sides to Donald Trump. Okay. Both sides just want to show, but nevertheless, both sides now want to continue this war.
Of course. Mr. Melnik, now Ukraine has consistently demanded an immediate ceasefire. How realistic is that, given the current military dynamics and Russia's territorial demands?
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me.
It was a pleasure.
It was very interesting to listen to Mr. Markov's speech, because it actually illustrates the atmosphere that's at the table of Russian-Ukrainian negotiations. Because we heard a long list of Russian demands and no commitments from the Russian side. So this is not the position for negotiations. So this is the long list of ultimatums. And let me remind you that at the beginning, the initial idea of the ceasefire was unconditional. No preconditions, just an agreement on the ceasefire for a certain period, 30 days, for instance. But Russia rejected this idea, and all the attempts of European partners, the joint attempts of Ukraine and European partners, actually were not accepted. So now we are 10 days after Trump's 50-day period that was given to Russia, actually, first of all, to Putin, to agree on the ceasefire. And days are counting. So I think that the purpose that Russia finally sent its delegation to Istanbul is just to please President Trump and to avoid this 100% tariff sanctions or whatever other actions from Washington, D.C.
Mr. Markov, Russia insists on recognition of control over regions like Donetsk and Crimea. Is there any room for compromise on these regions?
I think compromise, first of all, very big, that Russia not taking control of the Odessa, Kharkov, Dnepr, Nikolaev, Chernihiv, Sumy, and Zaporozhye, and Kiev. This is Russian cities. And we strongly believe that most of this population of those cities will be happy if they will be part of the Russia. They cannot express their pro-Russian views because in Ukraine no democracy, but very strong repressive dictatorship. But it's the fact that Vladimir Putin ready that Russia will take control on these four regions. It's great, fantastic, enormous step of Russia toward compromise. Great compromise. For this compromise, Vladimir Putin will be under the very strong criticism because everybody knows that Odessa, Kharkov, Dnepr, Nikolaev, all these Russian cities, and they should be part of the Russian Federation. And the compromise could be based on the fact that Russia could very greatly reluctant agree that these cities will be not part of the Russia, but only if these people in the city will live in freedom. If Ukrainian repressive regime and European awful countries behind this regime insisting that repressive dictatorship should continue, that prohibition of Russian language, which is native language for 90% of population in those cities. If they want to insist on political repression against Orthodox Church, Russia will say, no, we will continue, we'll go forward, and we will liberate Odessa, Kharkov, Dnepr, and Kiev, ancient Russian city, which was capital of Russia during 3 centuries years, and where Christianity come to Russia. And so if Western countries disagree on this compromise, Russia will liberate Odessa, Kharkov, Dnipropetrovsk, Nikolaev, and another those cities.
Mr. Melnik, how is Kiev approaching the territorial question in these talks, especially given domestic pressures and continued military mobilization?
Ukrainian position is very realistic, and it's based on Ukrainian constitution. It's based on the international law. What Mr. Markov calls, and his president, Russian territory, is actually just in the Russian imagination. As Angela Merkel, the former chancellor of Germany, said a long time ago that Vladimir Putin lives in parallel world. And here we also have this version of a parallel reality. So this is the Ukrainian cities, and all the so-called liberated by Russian forces cities are simply no man's land. They destroyed, they liberated people, mostly Russian-speaking, by the way, from their property. They killed scores of Ukrainians, and that's what they're going to do. And we see no intention to stop the war from the Russian side.
Mr. Markov, the United States has warned of further sanctions if no ceasefire is reached. Is this pressure having any impact on the Kremlin strategy?
No. First of all, by the way, before this, let me say a small correction. Ukrainian, Russian-speaking people, in Ukrainian army really fight against Russia. This, my opponent, absolutely right. But why? Because Ukrainian repressive regime keeps their families as hostages. If you look at the people whose family members left Ukrainian territory, they immediately leaving Ukrainian army and going away. There's only one reason why Ukrainian soldiers to fight against Russia is because their families is hostages of Vladimir Zelensky, in the hands of Vladimir Zelensky. As the United States, Russia is independent country during 5 centuries. We had ultimatum from Napoleon Bonaparte, from Adolf Hitler, from others. So all ultimatums Russia saying diplomatically, sorry, not But in fact, Russia answering to them, go to hell with all your ultimatums. And Donald Trump also know very well about this Russian, in fact, response. And my understanding that Donald Trump wants to get Nobel Peace Prize for stopping this Ukrainian war. Now I can understand that's too difficult to say, and he will not so much impose some sanction against Russia. Maybe some sanction will be, but sanction doesn't work. It's absolutely clear for Russia. But he will distance United States from Ukrainian war. He will not give weaponry, American weaponry to Ukrainian army. He will be ready to sell to everybody American weaponry. If Europeans want to buy American weaponry and to give good profit to American economy, and then if Europeans want to give this gift to the Ukrainian army, go ahead. Donald Trump many times told, this is not American war. This is a war of crazy Biden, and this is European war. If Europeans want to continue this war against Russia, go ahead. America will not take part in this war against Russia. It's a realistic approach, and I think it will be done by Donald Trump.
Mr. Melnik, is the U.S. support an asset or a liability in pushing forward the negotiations?
We don't know, because we recently we've seen changes in Donald Trump's approach to the resolution of this conflict, from his promises to end the war in 24 hours, then 100 days. Now we have another 50 days. But having said that, I should also stress that there are different sources of pressure on the Donald Trump's position. There is an internal pressure because actually his approach undermines the international credibility of the United States and also public opinion in the United States on the Ukrainian side. And that's why we could possibly expect that there would be some radical actions at the beginning of September when the 50-day period will expire. But this is not for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Markov, now Russian media has suggested the West is pushing Ukraine towards unrealistic goals. How does the Kremlin interpret Western support for Kiev at this stage?
As I understand your question, I will try to answer. Russia says that Russian suggestion is very realistic. As already mentioned, Russia is giving suggestion with great compromise because absolute majority of Russian population demands that Russian army should go forward and should liberate all these brilliant Russian cities like Odessa, Kharkiv City, Nikolaev, Zaporozhye, and others. But Russia giving compromise. But you know what is goal from our point of view, Western countries? In this is, by the way, from our point of view, it's not war between Russia and Ukraine, because Ukraine is ancient part of Russia. Ukraine now does not exist as an independent state. Ukraine is neo-colony, puppet regime of Western countries. Everybody knows this. All your audience know you. You know me, my opponents in Kyiv also know it very well. That there are no independent government in Ukraine, no sovereign Ukraine, but it's neo-colony puppet regime. And it's Western countries. First, United States, Great Britain, and Europe. Now, when the United States distance, now Europe and Great Britain, they have war against Russia by using Ukrainian army as their proxy army. That's why, from my point of view, realistic negotiations should be between Russia on one hand and Western countries on another hand, first of all, Europeans. And Russia suggested that the compromise solution could be democracy to Ukraine. Let's allow Ukrainians to to have solution about their future themselves. Just take away this repressive regime, liberate all political prisoners. You know, probably, or no, I think you don't know because it's under the censorship, that Vladimir Zelensky prohibited 25 political parties. He prohibited something about few hundreds of different media which was independent or in opposition to him. He is a dictator. At the same time, he is puppet in the hand of the Western countries. So realistically, we should have an equation. What Western countries want? They want to make anti-Russia. They want to have relation between Russia and Ukraine as a relation between
Mr. Markov, allow me allow me just to make a point here, Mr. Markov. You're describing the Ukrainian government as a puppet government, as dictatorship. Does this, from the Russian point of view, gives a pretext to occupy another country?
It's our point of view. It's exactly our point of view. That's why we have to start this war. You know, I'm talking about Russian position, not position of America and Europe. You should take an account. Look, remember, you remember that United States only appears told about Russia Gate, Russia intervention to United States election to support Donald Trump. Now, head of American intelligence service saying it was full falsification. It was absolutely lie of Barack Obama, that time President of the United States. Sometime years will come. And all international media also will agree what we're talking right now. In Ukraine, dictatorship, neo-colony regime, and this is awful, absolutely regime.
I understand the Russian point of view now. Yes, I understand the Russian point of view now, and I want Mr. Melnik to talk to me more about Ukraine's point of view. What are the non-negotiable demands this time? And I want to know from you the Ukrainian point of view in this regard.
First of all, let me thank again Mr. Markov for providing us with such a great understanding what kind of Russian position. And I'm sure that the Russian representative will speak exactly the same historical nonsense and about the same accusations. As for your question, the Ukrainian position is very clear. First, Ukraine supports this unconditional ceasefire and then the peace negotiation, but based on the realistic situation. And Ukraine has constitution. Ukraine is a democratic country. It's young democracy, but it's still democratic country with elections. And President Zelensky definitely is not a dictator. He's an elected president, and he will be, I'm sure he will be re-elected after the martial law is over. But Ukraine, the red lines for Ukraine is Ukraine will never recognize occupied territories. Not just because of the Ukrainian constitution, but not just because of that, because there are Ukrainian people, no matter which language they speak, no matter which religion they believe, because we have, for instance, in Crimea, we have 10% of Muslims, and most of them, or almost all of them, are occupied now and repressed by the Russian Israeli regime. So this is the one red line. Second, we will never allow Russia to tell us what kind of strategic geopolitical course Ukrainian people have to choose. We also don't want anyone, neither Moscow nor Washington, D.C., to tell Ukrainians what language they should speak or what church should they go. And this is the red lines. And this is something that President Zelensky cannot accept because he knows that it is not acceptable for Ukrainian people.
Okay. Mr. Markov, now, given the repeated failure of past talks, May and June included, why should this round be any different in your own point of view?
You ask whom?
Mr. Markov,
you ask whom?
Yes. Why should
you
this?
Ask who?
Yes.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
I was asking you, Mr. Markov, because of the repeated failures of past talks, why should this round be any different from your point of view, this round of negotiations?
I think that all these negotiations show for Donald Trump, because Ukrainian leaders is Zelensky, with combination with Macron and leaders of Great Britain and Germany, they just want to make sure to Donald Trump, say, look, Zelensky wants peace and Putin wants war. That's why you, Donald Trump, should give a lot of weaponry to Ukrainian army and impose new sanctions, great sanctions against Russia. But Russia wants to show that Russia wants to have peace, and Russia suggested a realistic suggestion, conditional ceasefire, or better to have a real peace deal with solution of those reasons which was the reason for the war. And this is just a show for Donald Trump. But he trusts to nobody. Donald Trump doesn't trust neither Russia nor Ukraine. That's why I don't think that this negotiation will be successful. My prediction is that it will be some kind of fighting during the summer. And then Donald Trump will say, look, Putin, you have a great approach or not? And Putin will say, okay, we will need additional few months. And as a result of more intensive fighting on the front line during summer and autumn to the end of this year, probably it will be better condition for the next time of negotiation. But generally, I think nothing which can stop this war now, and it can continue during 10 years. United States will distance themselves. It will not spend money to the Ukrainian war. Europe, very rich. They can spend a lot of money to Ukrainian war.
Russia is willing to continue this war for 10 more years?
Yeah, for 10 years it can be continued. Russia, in all its history, shows that Russia can be part of the very, very big wars. And Ukrainian regime, it's absolutely repressive fascist regime, and they suppress any protests. So this war can continue 10 years more.
Okay. Mr. Melnyk, now, how realistic, Mr. Melnyk, how realistic is the prospect of a leaders' summit referenced by President Zelensky during these talks?
Yes, indeed, this is one of the tasks that the Ukrainian delegation received from President Zelensky. And I don't see any possibility to agree. There is no ground for the leaders' meeting at the moment. Among other two priorities, there's the prisoners of war exchange, which is quite realistic. And the second issue is also very sensitive. It's the return of the Ukrainian children illegally deported by Russia. So we may expect some progress on the first two issues, but I don't think that any possibility of Putin agreement on meeting with President Zelensky is possible. And we heard just from Sergei Markov, it's a very common Russian position. They don't see Ukraine as an equal partner. They don't respect Ukraine as an independent country. So this is not the good position to meet.
Mr. Markov, I would like to thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Markov and Mr. Melnyk. Thank you so much for both of you for your valuable insights. And now we move to the live broadcasting of the UN Security Council session on Gaza and the Middle East.
Of some 600 Palestinians seeking shelter in the compound, including children and those with special needs. The Secretary General condemned the strike, stressing that attacks on places of worship are unacceptable. The incident also prompted widespread condemnation and calls for accountability from member states. The Israeli Prime Minister's office said that Israel deeply regrets that a stray ammunition hit the church and noted that Israel is investigating the incident. On 10th of July, EU High Representative Kallas announced that the EU and Israel has agreed on significant steps to improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Since then, Kallas has reiterated the need for implementing the agreement and that far more assistance is needed. Since 9th of July, following 130 days of a full blockade on fuel, Israel authorities allow the entry of a small number of fuel trucks through the Kerem Shalom Karim Abu Salem crossing for medical facilities and other essential services. This amount is a fraction of what is required to run essential life-saving services in Gaza, where nearly every aspect of life depends on fuel. Mr. President, the situation in the occupied West Bank also remains deeply concerning, with high levels of violence driven by ongoing Israeli military operations, many involving civilian casualties and extensive damages to homes and infrastructure, attacks by settlers against Palestinians, and attacks by Palestinians against Israelis. On 1st of July, Israeli security forces shot and killed a 17-year-old Palestinian boy during an operation in Ramallah. He was reportedly shot from inside an armored vehicle while walking with a relative. On 10th of July, 2 Palestinians shot and killed an Israeli man in the Gush Etzion settlement. The Palestinian perpetrators were reportedly shot and killed by Israeli civilians at the scene. On 11th of July, Israeli settlers attacked and killed 2 Palestinians, one of them a visiting American citizen, near the village of Sinjil. One of them reportedly bled to death after being shot, and the other was beaten with bats and sticks. On 17th of July, U.S. Ambassador to Israel Huckabee condemned the attack as a terrorist act and said Israel must ensure accountability. Settlement advancement also continues, as numerous ministers and members of the Knesset intensify their calls on the government to formally annex the West Bank or parts of it. Further exacerbating the situation, the Palestinian Authority continues to face a dire fiscal crisis. The continued withholding of clearance revenues by Israel, amounting to $2.7 billion, has severely impacted the Palestinian Authority ability to meet its core obligation and sustain essential public services. Since May, the Palestinian Authority has been unable to pay civil servant salaries, including those of the security forces, or provide social support. In an emergency session held on 17th of July, the Palestinian cabinet issued a stark warning that the Palestinian Authority may be forced to temporarily shut down vital sectors. Beyond the immediate risk to healthcare and basic service delivery, the Palestinian Authority also cautioned that similar disruptions across other institutions could erode social cohesion and undermine overall stability. Unless urgently addressed, the deterioration of the Palestinian Authority's fiscal and institutional situation could have catastrophic consequences, undermining the significant progress made over many years to build up Palestinian institutions. It is essential that the international community provide immediate support to address the Palestinian Authority's fiscal challenges, strengthening its governance capacity, and prepare it to reassume its responsibilities in Gaza. Mr. President, in the midst of these multiple crises, UNRWA continues to face immense operational, political, and financial pressures. UNRWA's operations have been impeded in Gaza and the occupied West Bank. 330 agency staff have been killed in the war in Gaza. I reiterate the Secretary General's message that UNRWA cannot be replaced, and I cannot overstate enough how serious the agency's financial crisis is. Based on current forecasts, there is not enough money to sustain all operations in all fields beyond August 2025. Mr. President, we remain concerned by the precarious situation in the region, marked by sporadic developments and recurrent volatility. The situation along the Blue Line remains stable but fragile. The Israel Defense Forces maintain a presence north of the Blue Line, while unauthorized weapons belonging to non-state actors are still being uncovered in southern Lebanon by the Lebanese armed forces and UNIFIL. In this context, the Lebanese authorities have reiterated their commitment to bringing all arms under the exclusive control of the state. I urge both Lebanon and Israel to honor their obligations under the cessation of hostilities and to take concrete steps toward the full implementation of Resolution 1701, restoring and sustaining stability in the area. Syria is contending with another episode of violence that puts at risk its path to a peaceful, credible, orderly, and inclusive political transition. Fighting in Suwaida has resulted in hundreds of casualties, including Druze and Bedouin civilians. I reiterate the Secretary General's unequivocal condemnation of all violence against civilians, including all acts that fan the flames of sectarian tensions and rob the people of Syria of their opportunity for peace and reconciliation after 14 years of brutal conflict. Against this backdrop, citing the violations against the Druze community and pledging to protect them, between 12 and 16 July, Israel resumed and intensified its airstrikes on Syrian territory. It is essential that both Israel and Syria uphold the terms of the 1974 Disengagement of Forces Agreement to preserve the ceasefire between both parties and refrain from any action that would further undermine it and the stability of the Golan region. Mr. President, repeated and increasingly desperate appeals for an urgent ceasefire in Gaza have been made in this Council. Today, the situation inside the Strip, especially for women and children, is more dire than at any time in this crisis. I implore the parties, first and foremost, to end this war, release all hostages, and allow the Palestinian population in Gaza to receive the humanitarian assistance they so desperately need. I urge all member states, including those in the Council, to take all possible steps to bring about this end. Urgent steps are needed to reverse the deeply concerning trajectory we see across the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem. Addressing the high levels of violence, including stopping the escalating settler attacks in the occupied West Bank, alongside fiscal relief for the Palestinian Authority, are key priorities. There will be no lasting solution to this crisis without a political horizon to resolve the conflict and an end to the occupation. The upcoming ministerial meeting to support the two-state solution, co-hosted by France and Saudi Arabia, is key to highlight international consensus around these goals and reaffirm the principle sustaining the two-state solutions. It is also a crucial moment to express support for the Palestinian Authority, identify ways to strengthening and encourage further reforms in line with its commitments. Through tangible steps, our unwavering commitment to the two-state solution. Our goal is clear, realizing the vision of two states, Israel and a viable and sovereign Palestinian state, of which Gaza is an integral part, living side by side in peace and security within secure and recognized borders on the basis of the pre-1967 lines, with Jerusalem as the capital of both states. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Khalid Khairi, Assistant Secretary General for the Middle East, Asia, and the Pacific, Departments of Political and Peace-Building Affairs and Peace Operations. I would now give the floor to the Permanent Observer of the Observer State of Palestine.
Mr. President, we thank Pakistan for elevating this open debate to a ministerial level, and in this connection, we welcome Your Excellency presiding over this very important meeting. I also would like to thank ASG, Mr. Khalid Khairi, for his briefing. Mr. President, 4-year-old Razan fought for as long as she could, but her body gave up and she died of malnutrition on Sunday. Yesterday, 6-year-old Yusuf died of starvation. He was among 15 people to starve to death in the last 24 hours in Gaza. Israel has ravaged Gaza. It has destroyed nearly everything in that narrow strip of Palestinian land. But nearly 2 million human beings remain, including 1 million children. They must be saved. Israel has destroyed everything, their lives, their homes, the mosques and the churches, the schools and the hospitals, the entire infrastructure of life, and even the cemeteries. But make no mistake, the real target is the 2 million Palestinians who remain in Gaza. For Israel, their destruction is required for its scheme to take over the land. The fact Netanyahu and his government are actively pursuing transforming Gaza into a land without a people through genocide and ethnic cleansing under the unconvincing disguise of voluntary migration has only been made possible by the impunity they enjoy. All of what is happening now was predictable, premeditated and planned. It is a criminal and cruel enterprise occurring openly for all to see. Do you know when was the first plan for so-called voluntary migration presented to the Israeli cabinet? 13th October 2023. Go back to what we said in this very chamber 20 months ago. We said this would be happening. It took tens of thousands of Palestinians killed for the world to acknowledge it. How many more need to die before getting the world to act to stop this genocide? Mr. President, in Gaza, starved journalists are reporting about starved health and humanitarian personnel trying to save the lives of starving infants and children and their starving families. People are dying of hunger and thirst by design or while desperately trying to get food or water by design. People are collapsing in the streets while being forcibly displaced yet again by design. People are being gunned down and murdered by Israeli soldiers for merely trying to get a bag of flour or lentils to feed their families, again by design. Every day now, we receive heart-wrenching messages from Gaza with few words. I am hungry. This is what our children are saying, and every individual in Gaza is saying, I am hungry. There is no food for my family. We are dying. Help us. What should we tell them? What should the Security Council tell them? That the whole world is against this starvation policy and yet it is worsening. That no one wants to see people in Gaza starving and yet the world watches on as they die of hunger and thirst. Should we read to them the strong statements issued or the resolutions adopted? What should we tell them? They hear of outrage, condemnation, pressure, and deals being made, but find no food to save their lives and the lives of their loved ones, or get shot to death while trying to reach it. They bury their sons and daughters every day. They grow thinner as their bodies eat away at them every day, wasting away, their struggle to survive more painful and more crushing every day. What should we tell them? That the negotiations for a ceasefire continue, and that in the meantime Israel has been given a right to massacre them and to deny them aid to life? Is that what international law stipulates? Is that what humanity dictates? What should we tell them? that this is the extent of what the world can do or is willing to do to save Palestinian lives? That the fact the perpetrators of these horrors are Israelis means they cannot be held to account? That there is aid at the borders and brave UN and humanitarian personnel ready to distribute this aid as they had done before, but we cannot get Israel to open the crossings and allow the aid to be distributed without killing those distributing it or those receiving it. What is our collective plan to actually save lives? What is being done now that could actually stop this horror? That is the only measure that matters. Are we doing what is necessary to save the millions of lives at risk? Are we upholding our legal, political, humanitarian, moral, and human obligations? And the answer is absolutely clear: we are not. So which one is it? Are Palestinian lives not worth saving? Or does Israeli supremacy extend as far as conferring upon Israel a right of life and death over the Palestinian people as a whole? Mr. President, it is now for every state to determine where it stands at this historical juncture. Every single country will be asked, what did you do during this genocide? Not what you said or what you considered doing, but what did you actually do? What did you do to stop it and stop the destruction of human life? There is no time to waste and no place for self-inflicted powerlessness. Countries have tools they need to use, nationally and collectively, to bring the genocide to an end. Ask yourselves, did we do everything possible? And I assure you, it is impossible to say yes. We call for a coalition of the willing to take every action necessary now to end the genocide, to uphold international law and save what is left of our humanity under the rubble in Gaza, and end the occupation and conflict. A year ago, the ICJ adopted a landmark opinion on ending the unlawful presence of Israel in the occupied Palestinian territory that spelled out in no uncertain terms the obligations of Israel and, as importantly, the obligations of third parties. You. Any state claiming to be a law-abiding state must take action to comply with this opinion and ensure it moves away from complicity and contributes to accountability. The General Assembly called over a month ago upon all member states to individually and collectively advance accountability and take all measures necessary, in line with international law and the Charter of the United Nations, to ensure compliance by Israel, the occupying power, with its obligations. Since the adoption of that resolution, more than 3,000 Palestinians were killed, the majority women and children. States must act now to stop these atrocities. I represented the state of Palestine at the meeting of the Hague Group in Bogota, Colombia, where countries came together and adopted concrete measures to halt the genocide and advance accountability. This is an important step in the right direction. Several of the countries represented here have also announced concrete steps and initiatives to the same effect. But much more needs to be done, and fast. The commitment is good by some, but it's not sufficient. We need more from all of you. Within days, not weeks, and certainly not months, we are out of time, because every day we fail to act, children are killed, starved, orphaned, burned, disabled, and traumatized. Families are shattered. Life is destroyed. Red lines are useless if they can be crossed over and over again without consequences. Rules are worthless if we are not willing to sanction their breacher. Words are meaningless if they are not followed by action. We need you to act, and act now. Of course, it is better to speak out rather than stay silent, but speaking out cannot be an alternative to action, especially when it is evident Israel is not listening and becoming only more brutal, only more dangerous. And we should not pretend we are not hearing what Israel is saying or not seeing what it is doing. Netanyahu, Katz, Saar, Smotrich, and Ben Gvir are clear. They say there are no innocent people in Gaza. They call our children children of darkness. They call our people human animals and have been acting accordingly. They spoke of inflicting death and destruction on all of Gaza, and they did. They are confessing to their own crimes and are committing them in plain sight for all to see. 7 decades of impunity make them confident they have no reason to hide their intentions or actions. Mr. President, we warn against all those who try to portray this conflict as a religious conflict, including those who do so to shield Israel from criticism and condemnation. This is not a conflict between Jews and Muslims. It is a war against Palestinian presence in the land of Palestine. Palestinian Christians are not spared, from Gaza to Taiba, from Bethlehem to Jerusalem. The Israeli strike against the Holy Family Church is not the first of its kind. By the way, this is the church that the late Pope Francis used to call every day. The historic Greek Orthodox Church of Saint Porphyrius in Gaza was bombed in the early days of the war, as was the great Omari Mosque. 2 Palestinian women were shot and killed on the grounds of the Holy Family Church back in December 2023. Settlers' terror attacks are about forcibly displacing Palestinian communities regardless of their faith and about stealing their land. Christians are harassed, attacked, and beaten like their Muslim brothers and sisters. When trying to celebrate their holy days, priests and nuns report attacks against them and the church properties. They are spat on, insulted, and threatened by Israeli extremists. This is not a conflict between Jews and Muslims. The diversity of our people reflects the diversity of this land and its rich history and its significance for all monotheistic religions. And the solidarity movement with Palestine is comprised of people of all nationalities and all faiths, coming together against injustice, against occupation and apartheid, against oppression and genocide. And it includes Israelis who care about justice, but also about Israel and its future. And they know that the path on which Israel has embarked, by which it thinks it can impose its will on the region through bullets and bombs and expects surrender than peace, is reckless and wrong and will lead to devastating effects for the region and the world. Mark my words, Israel's genocide in Gaza will redefine the region and our world for generations to come. And what we do next will determine in what way. Let me repeat that. Mark my words. Israel's genocide in Gaza will redefine the region and our world for generations to come. And what we do next will determine in what way. Mr. President, an alternative path is possible if we act now, where life is restored in Gaza, where freedom for the Palestinian people is achieved, where Palestinians and Israelis can live in shared space and security, and where the region as a whole can experience holding international law and based on the relevant UN resolutions and the fulfillment of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people, including self-determination and the realization of their right to their independent state, and the implementation of the two-state solution with Palestine and Israel living side by side in peace and security. This is the only path forward. It requires the mobilization of all states to advance freedom and justice leading to peace and security. The international conference to be convened by Saudi Arabia and France at the end of this month offers a unique opportunity to transform international law and the international consensus into an achievable plan and to demonstrate resolve to end the occupation and conflict once and for all, for the benefit of all peoples and of all the states of the region. That is the path that must be taken with courage and commitment and without delay. Mr. President, it all starts with Gaza, with the children of Gaza. For now, history will remember us all for the lives we failed to save. But many more lives remain to be saved. Let us not fail them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Permanent Observer of the Observer State of Palestine, for your statement. I will now give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe this chamber and the UN would benefit from something basic, a full and honest overview of the current state of our region. Let's begin in Gaza, where Hamas continues with its deprived tactics. 50 innocent people.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have just seen the UN Security Council session on Gaza. We have listened to the Assistant Secretary General for Middle East, Asia and the Pacific, who talked about Israeli attacks and atrocities that continue on the Palestinian people as the Israeli illegal settlements also continue. He highlighted the urgent need of the international community to play its role in Gaza, and he reiterated UN Secretary General's call that UNRWA cannot be replaced. He also underlined urgent steps that are needed to stop the escalation of violence in Gaza and support the two-state solution. We have also listened to the representative of Palestine, Mr. Riyad Mansour, who talked about Palestinians who continue to die every day due to starvation, including women and children, and he called on the world to stop this genocide. He also said that countries need to use their tools and to do everything possible, every action necessary to end the genocide and the occupation and uphold international law. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes today's episode of In Depth. Thank you so much for joining us and stay tuned for more updates here on Q News.